We'll start off with Gary with Tried and True Home Loans, give us a mortgage update. Then we're going to have Tom from the Whisper Network. He's been on a couple times. He's just going to give us a quick little update on kind of where they're at with their product, be available to answer any questions you have had using it, and just again a brief, not a demo, but just kind of where it can fit into your business. And then we're going to roll into how to use some commonly misused forms. So I made a short list here of forms that actually get misused quite often, or I get a lot of questions on, especially the COP and the assignment agreement and the SPRP. We'll cover those, as well as addendum versus amendment, when to use either one. So before I roll into that though, let's start with Gary. Good morning, Gary. How's it going?
It's going good, thanks. Happy Monday. Um, and thank you for attending the meeting. I'm going to start to share my screen. Can you see my meeting 721?
Yep.
All right, cool. So yeah, good morning. Yes, my name is Gary McDonald. I'm with Tried and True Home Loans, which is the sister company of Rise Realty. There's a whole bunch of loan officers at Tried and True now. And to access us, just go in the back office. You'll see Tried and True Home Loans right there, and just click on that, and that'll take you over to our contact information. So if we can help you with any loan products, any scenarios, or get your clients pre-approved, please reach out. So let's start off with the rate update. So I was on that about 3 weeks ago, and rates are slightly up from then. I think it was just under 6.75, and now it's slightly over. This is the 30-year fixed conventional. So we're just over 6.75 on the 30-year fixed. On the FHA, again, we are up a little bit from 3 weeks ago, not much, maybe an eighth of a point. So low to mid sixes on the FHA. Same again on the VA. It's basically almost identical on the trajectories for those two. So yeah, low to mid sixes on the FHA VA. And then I just thought I would add the 15-year fixed, which is always a lower rate. Yeah, so this will be conventional, like the 30-year conventional. And it's normally around half a point lower than the 30-year. But at the moment, as you can see, it's almost 3/4 of a point lower. So it's actually quite a good deal at the moment. And then to go over the jumbo, you saw just a while back on that slide, the conventional is right around here. So it's maybe an eighth of a point higher than conventional for a jumbo loan right now. So these also are good deals. So if you have clients out there looking for jumbo rates, they are bad right now, especially compared to conventional. So that's where we are at with the rates. And I thought I'd talk a little bit this week about the down payment assistance programs that we have. This shows nationwide. There's what 2,500 assistance programs nationwide. California has the most at 321. Now, not all of these are funded. I think some have spent their money. I think around 90 of them have spent their money. So we've still got around 230 active down payment assistance programs going in California. And I can't know all of them because there are that many. A lot of them are localized. So they'll be either for a city or a county or a certain demographic. So you just can't learn all the programs. And if you did, next week, more than likely, they'll change the criteria and you got to learn them all over again. But there are quite a few. So one of the resources that some of us have in the MLS is free. It's called Down Payment Resource. And it's basically, it's also for realtors and home buyers. So it's home buyers, professionals. On the professional side, it'll split between realtors and loan officers. So even the realtors can have this access. And so if you go into the MLS, you'll come to this page, and I'll show you how to access this over here. So in the MLS, you've got the down payment resource, and you'll be clicking on that, and it would come to this page, and it would have your name up here, and you've got this link that you can market to wherever in social media, emails, blogs, you name it. You can market this, and this is your own link. And with this link, people can go onto this page, enter some information, and find out what down payment assistance programs they can get in the area that they are looking in. So this will be the page that if they click this link, it takes them to this page. And again, it's still got your name up here, and then they can enter some information, sales price, and all this kind of stuff. And then I'm not sure, probably after this, they'll have to enter some contact information. And then it's basically a lead for you. And for some of the MLSs, this is free. So check with yours and see if you have it. And if not, then talk with the MLS and see if they'll add it, because it's a very good program. And then if you do have it in the MLS and you're searching for a property for a client, down here, you've got the down payment resource. And so some of the properties have this, like on the previous one, it's 900,000. It hasn't got it because no one would qualify for the down payment assistance program who could afford a $900,000 home. But for something at this price range or even higher, the down payment assistance program is really good. So on your searches, if you click this, you can go in there and see all the programs available for that property. So like I was saying, quite often it's geo targeted. So it's either the city or the county that will cover this. So you can go through this and see all the properties. So let me get back to my slide now. So the next class for this is going to be the 14th of August. And I'm going to post this link into chat, wherever chat went. When you're sharing the screen, I guess the chat vanishes. So I just shared a link. So this is a webinar, and it'll show you all the down payment programs. Well, not all of them, but the main ones. So this would be a good one to go on. The next one is the 14th of August. I think they just had one last week. So I would register for that and learn some more. And then if you do have any questions about the down payment assistance programs, reach out to one of the loan officers at Tried and True Home Loans, and we would love to help and go over them. You know, again, like I was saying, there's so many that we can't know all of them, but we would know the major ones and the ones that can work for your clients. So like I said, reach out to us, and that's about it for this week. If you do have any questions or want to reach out, here's my contact information. You can scan the QR code or just write it all down, old school. But that's about it, Travis, for me this week. Back to you.
Sounds good. Thanks for showing us that, right now is a pretty good time to, talk about that with your sphere of influence. If you're doing any social media marketing, things like that, trying to drum up some business, the down payment assistance is pretty advantageous in this current market because a lot of those programs do rely on some sort of seller contribution or that can enhance them pretty considerably. And that is a fairly easy thing to work into the purchase agreement right now, because multiple offer situations are far and few between, and the buyers do have a lot more leverage right now than they have had in previous markets. So, and we've talked about down payment assistance programs over the years, and it's always usually in this type of market cycle where they're pretty advantageous for getting buyers to interact with you a little bit more. Obviously, not all of them are going to qualify for this type of thing, but the idea is to get a conversation going and let them know that there is a ton of programs out there to get them into a house. Um, Cal HFA is a really good one, and the rates are always very, very competitive on those. So it's not like they're going to be paying, you know, higher interest rates or anything like that than they would just standard FHA and things like that. They're actually very good rates. So consider that, and speak to one of our loan officers if you want to learn more about the down payment assistance programs and how you can talk to buyers about them. So thanks a lot, uh, Gary. And now we have Tom with the Whisper Network, and he's gonna chat with us for a few minutes on kind of what's been going on over there. How you doing, Tom?
Doing well, Travis. Thanks for giving me the opportunity again to come in here and talk to everyone. Really, we've done a couple of long demos, walk through the product. I did a little bit for you guys in January. We talked a little bit for some of the folks that Travis, and we've partnered for those folks that are working within the CRM platform where Travis is making that part of the package, so you guys have access to it. But really, what I want to do is say to everybody on the phone today, and I'm not sure which group you might fall into. Maybe you're an independent agent working separately from some of the services Travis offers, but we want to help you guys unlock and find deals. Okay. And I can find you opportunities within the next 24 hours if you guys jump in here, and I'm going to show you how to do it. So I guess I can't really see show of hands, but this is really for people who have in one of these three scenarios. Anybody who has a listing appointment coming up over the next couple weeks, we're going to get you matched to a buyer ideally, and try and give you some opportunities to share with that listing appointment to convert them. If you have a buyer who hasn't maybe found something they're looking for or pulled the trigger, we're going to show you up to about 7,500 off market opportunities currently within the marketplace right now that are available. We also want to see if you're looking to get a listing appointment or convince a buyer to work with you. If you're in any one of those four categories, you should be signing up. It's a free profile to create. You can put those prospective opportunities in the platform, and we're going to go ahead and get you guys matched with another agent to start unlocking those conversations. So, this is part of a sales process that we think is really critical for the market. We've added hundreds of agents. We've got teams from EXP and Compass, and we're growing across the country. So not only are we here in the Southern California markets, but we're getting a lot of folks in there. So I really encourage you now to go ahead and do this. I'm going to spend just a few minutes to show you how to do it. If you spend these few minutes, create your profile. There's no obligation to pay for anything for the free profile. We can at least get you moving. And then if you want some free time, we do offer a trial period at the end, and you're welcome to do that. You can cancel anytime if you're not happy with it. Or move back to the freemium account. Our goal is to support you. So here's all I want you. I'm going to pause for just a second while I get my screen share up, and we're going to walk through how to set up either your listing appointment address and get that exposed to the market so you can have buyers matched, go to that conversation. We're going to find you some off-market properties for those prospective buyers you're working with, and again, helping you get those folks converted to active clients. So unless you're all doing like 5 deals that are working live right now, this can help you build more business. For those of you who have been struggling to get your business off the ground, I really encourage you to do this. Okay. I will be quiet now and I'll show you what we got going on here. Let's make sure we got this. Give me just one
While you do
second.
that, we had an example of this come up actually last week where someone from our team reached out to me and said, "Hey, um, you know, they had a deal going. That deal fell out, and their client then said, "Hey, I'm only looking in Lake San Marcos now, and I want to be pretty much on the lake. And so, if you have any off markets or anything like that, that's what I'm looking for now." So they reached out to me, asked if I, knew of anybody that had, pocket listings essentially in Lake San Marcos. And I was like, I don't. I mean, I don't keep track of everybody's, prospects there, seller prospects. So I referred him over to Tom because what this does is, as everybody's properties are in Whisper, you can then say, oh, it looks like these 5 agents right here have some potential listings that my client would be interested in. I need to reach out to them. And they're not on market stuff, they're off market stuff. So that was a perfect example of how this, comes into play into business.
Thanks for Travis for that. It's a really good use case example. And that's right. We're trying to cross-reference deals for you guys to get them moving forward. And it's really for those scenarios I talked about. Maybe you're trying to convert a listing appointment. We have off markets and you may have someone looking for an off market property that clearly is fit. But I wanted to focus on like very clear examples. You've got a listing appointment coming up. This person should be in here. You should show them that you're doing work. So if you're on and you're logged in, it's very, very simple. Once you've created your account, you're going to get taken to the onboarding kind of workflow. All you need to do, and I encourage people right now, if they've spent the 2 minutes to create the account, verify it, and then go to the onboarding process. And I'll put my information afterwards. If people are having any kind of technical difficulties, I'm happy to have a follow up with you one-on-one. You literally put in a name, an email, a phone number, and an address. So if that listing appointment you're going on to, put it in. You have a relationship. This is going to help us unearth buyers for that potential property. So when you sit down in front of them, you're going to say, I've already found you a buyer, right? If that doesn't convert your listing appointment, I'm not sure what will. So we want to help you do that. Or you want to just kind of get some workflow going. So I encourage you, come in here. You can add a couple of names. If you already are working with, let's say, one of the major CRMs, you can actually import your CRM information to help you unearth more opportunities. I'm not going to, you don't have to do that part now. You can just add in 1 or 2 or 3 upcoming listing appointments or even people you're trying to get for a listing. The next step is very simple. You can establish yourself a very quick buyer search. Whether you're using an existing client or just adding a new client to the market, you can put in the neighborhood, city, zip, any of the information you want here about this particular property, what type of home, the price point, everything. That is going to find you. And I will guarantee you within 24 hours of you establishing these buyer searches, you're going to get matched to agents with opportunities. You're going to get a text message notification. That other agent's going to get a text. Now you're going to call them up and you're going to say, what's the story for this property? It's really, really powerful tool for you to go in there and say, wow, there may be an opportunity for this home. Let me contact my client. We are trying to get you in front of your clients about deals. This isn't just about leads. You already have these relationships. You already have this information. So please, if you're on and you've decided to create a free profile, again, no commitment to pay for anything right now to create these elements, and we'll match you even if you're not paying. Now, the free trial is going to get you everything fully vetted going forward. So that would be the last step if you do it. But again, I'm not even compelling you to do that. I think you should start here and see what happens in the marketplace and do it. It's really exciting stuff that we got going on here. We've had some large conversations. So these are the 2 big steps: adding a couple of homeowners, adding a couple of buyer searches here. And then once you're done with that, you're going to be able to see what's going in the marketplace. You're going to be able to search and find all these different opportunities here. You're going to get in there and look for those properties. We have a couple of new really exciting things. If you work with investors and you're working with assignable contracts, we now have the trading desk. We have trader properties that allow agents or investors, and you should encourage those guys to come in here to create a searchable database for those assignable contracts. You can put an expiration date on them and search for them. So if you have investors who are looking for assignable contracts, here's just an example. I can create that save search and I can set it for the trader properties, and I can actually look for the specific date that I want to find the expiration on. Once that's all ready to go, you're able to look for those properties and see what's happening with them. We really think that's going to be a powerful tool for those investors who are looking to kind of move those. They're kind of exploding deals. As you know, we have whispers and rumors. Those are the 2 marketplaces that play. Just as a reminder, the rumors are the more speculative deals. The whispers are the full true off markets. So know those 2 classifications that you have with it. That's really where we're at right now. Whoops, I'm going to get out of here. Later this week, you're going to be able to reverse prospect search and search for buyers, where you're going to literally see all the buyers searching for homes in your area, and you're going to be able to see the agent and connect with them here, call them, or even request they share some information with you about that buyer. That will be released, I think, on Wednesday morning or Thursday morning at the latest. So you'll have availability to that. And that's the premium services. If you want to do the free trial, which is requires a credit card, but the other stuff, the matching, getting you moving forward, please do this now. Let me help you, because if you're not getting a lot of deals and you're struggling to find opportunities, why wouldn't you take advantage of this? In my opinion, if you're not, you know, look, I just want to help you guys find more deals. So anyway, I'll be quiet. I'm going to put my email in the chat here. And if you guys are interested in more information or want to do this, I really encourage you guys to kind of do this now. My email's here. Please reach out. I'm going to ask Travis to let me kind of come back and continue to help you guys with this and come in and see if you guys have had any experiences. You hopefully will get some cross-reference deals with each other and we can move forward. And again, just trying to find you guys opportunities. So thank you for your time. I'll shut up now and I'll sit on for a few minutes if you guys want to chat with me, and then I'm going to jump at 9:30. But you've got my email there. Thanks, Travis.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. And yeah, I like the product. I think that there's a lot of opportunity here, and potentially missed opportunity if you're not using it, because if you do have that client that's like, look, I'll buy, but it has to be this thing right here, then this can help you unearth that by making that connection with the listing agent who might be connected to the owner of that home and can get that deal moving forward potentially for you. So, all right. Thanks for coming back on again. We'll have you again. Probably after you get a few more updates in, and then we'll circle back. So
That's good.
right on. Okay. You want to stop your share real quick? Go ahead. Let's see.
I think you can take
So
it. It's not share. Oh, there to stop
I,
share.
I got it. I got it. All right, cool. Okay. Now on to more of the dry stuff. Dry but important. So obviously I talk to everybody a lot. And so I wanted to review some of the more common addendums and amendments and things like that we're using on a daily basis that actually many of us are using incorrectly or just don't fully have a good grasp of how to use it properly. So we're going to run through some of the more frequented addendums and amendments. First, let's talk about amendment, or actually addendum versus amendment, and what is the difference. So if you pull this up, addendum would be an addition to, an attachment, or a supplement. And so we've been, I don't know if we want to say conditioned, but over the many years, if you've been in real estate a long time, if we needed to do anything with a contract, it was throw it on an addendum, throw it on an addendum. But several years back, there was a new form that CAR added in called the amendment, because actually that is the proper term. So if you look up amendment, that is a change, modification, or revision. So you want to make sure that you're using either an addendum or an amendment, depending on what it is you're doing. So creation and purpose of the amendment. In 2017, CAR introduced amendment of existing agreement terms. It's CAR form AEA. Even though this form has been around for almost 7 years now, we still see many seasoned agents using the addendum form. They're probably the worst culprits, those that have been in the business the longest, because that's just what we had back then. But they're using that for modifications and even teaching newer licensees to do the same, which is actually incorrect. So prior to 2017, almost every form within the CAR standard form library, other than the purchase agreement, that was intended to be signed by a buyer or seller was called an addendum, regardless of what, or actually when it was introduced into the transaction. So these forms included, the extension of time, the backup backup offer addendum, additional signature addendum, short sale addendum, and then just the addendum. So the AEA was created to minimize the problem of uncertainty from parties who signed an addendum to propose a change only to have the other party not agree and refuse to sign or ignore the proposed change. So if we're looking at the amendment, the AEA, the first line of this form identifies AE as a proposal, whose terms are specified in paragraph 1. So this would be after the contract has already been agreed to. So you have your purchase contract in place and something happens. You need to do a price reduction. You need to, add a buyer credit in there, things like that, probably after inspections. So you would use the amendment because you are amending an already agreed to contract. So this is an example of what section 1 would look like. So in the first section here, it is, purchase price to be now 1.3 million. Maybe it's a reduction in price or whatever it's going to be, or seller to credit a total of 10,000 towards buyers recurring non-recurring closing costs. You're just going to put your proposed changes to the contract in section 1 there. Paragraph 2 provides that the proposal, like an offer or counteroffer, expires automatically unless accepted by the other party in the specified time, defaulting to 3 days after it is signed. So you're going to put the expiration. This is, in this instance, it could be the buyer or the seller proposing the amendment. This would be the buyer proposing a price change and a credit. And then you see that it's going to expire on the third day at 5 p.m., just like a counteroffer would. The buyer's going to sign it. And then if the seller signs it or accepts it, then they are going to go ahead and sign as well, just like a counteroffer or offer. If the receiving party takes no action, so in this instance, it would be the seller, they'd be the receiving party, then the proposal terminates and the terms of the contract remain unchanged. With the automatic expiration language in the AEA, the party initiating the request can make a decision on how to proceed without waiting indefinitely for a response from the other principal. So when to use an addendum versus an amendment? In most cases, an addendum is intended to be attached to an offer or other document. It supplements in the other document's terms. So remember, the addendum is in addition to or supplements. It is especially useful if there is not enough room to write in all the terms to be added to the offer or other document. Although the text overflow addendum, the TOA, function in zip forms reduces the need to attach a general addendum to supplement an offer or document. It seems like the TOA and how it works can be a little problematic at times, but there's also that function. An addendum is an open-ended offer that can be accepted at any time prior to its written withdrawal. So yes, you should always withdraw an unaccepted addendum. So if you have addendums floating out there in your transaction that you were using like an amendment and they didn't get agreed to, you probably want to go ahead and withdraw those, because if that gets signed, all of a sudden now it's part of the contract because there is no expiration on those. So if you were tossing back and forth addendums to do a price change and all of a sudden, one gets signed that actually, was two addendums back as you were floating them back and forth, that could be the new deal. So because it wasn't expired, there is no expiration on the addendum. So you want to make sure you're using the amendment for those types of changes. An amendment is intended to be used after the contract has already been created, and one party suggests a modification of the binding agreement. So the AEA is a proposal and expires if not accepted. Specific examples: request for repairs, form RR. The RR is issued after an offer has been accepted, typically during the buyer's investigation period. Since it comes after an agreement, it works like an amendment and not an addendum. And you'll notice that there is an expiration on the RR as well. In December of 21, expiration language was added to the RR so that if the seller does not respond in time, the RR expires, having the effect of letting the buyer know that the requests have been rejected. So this is a little snippet of the RR right there. You'll see that they did add expiration in there. So, reminder, if a buyer proposes a request for repairs and the seller does not respond, which can be deemed revoked or rejected, the buyer must still perform on the RPA timelines with regards to releasing applicable contingencies or exercise a right to cancel the purchase. The contingency timelines do not automatically extend. So, and that is a pretty common misconception that, we are whatever, 16 days into the purchase, and now the buyer sends over, the RR. That doesn't mean that the contingency to release the buyer's investigations isn't still due on the 17th day. It is still due on the 17th day. And truthfully, at that point, the seller can just respond with a notice to perform and completely ignore this RR, and the buyer would need to perform in one way or another. So I think we have a couple of things coming up in chat. Let me double check here. Right. That was just Tom logging off. So, all right. So let's look at the ETA. ETA has pre-printed language to extend escrow or give buyer more time to remove contingencies. So, and actually, sorry, I called it an addendum up here. It's an amendment because you are amending the terms of an already agreed to contract. So, and we can use this for many different reasons. Extension of escrow. So if you need to propose a change in the escrow, whether sooner or later than what was agreed to originally with the offer and counteroffer. Extension of contingencies if you need more time for investigations or loans or whatever. Any other extensions of time. Maybe you haven't received the HOA docs back yet, or maybe there is some sort of cloud on title or something that's preventing the buyer from approving the prelim. There's other little nichey ones that you can kind of put in here too. Can also put in additional terms. In number 4, got ahead of myself here. What would you put on additional terms? Well, if you are maybe on the listing side and you're agreeing to extend escrow for another week because the buyer, is still waiting for loan approval or whatever the situation is. Maybe you put in the propose a new close of escrow date, and then in additional terms, you ask for a full or partial EMD release. A release of EMD to the seller in exchange for an extension of time. You can also put in like a per diem amount for the SIP, an increase in total rent or per diem for extension of seller and time of possession. I know when I'm on the listing side, in order to grant extensions, I usually want something in exchange. I just don't automatically grant it. I usually go straight for the earnest money release. If you ever get in that situation, you want to know how to do that, just give me a call. So that was number 4. So this one's been around for a while. It was really confusing. In my opinion, it was pretty unclear of how to use this. And this is the additional signature addendum car form ASA. So this is an addendum because it's an attachment. It's not changing anything in an already agreed to contract. So this is the form that you use to add additional signers when there are more than 2 on the purchase or listing. And the 2025 revision that just came out has been simplified. It looks a lot cleaner to me. I like what they did here. It seems much easier to use and to understand. So first of all, This is not for adding or removing somebody from a contract. This is when there are more than two signers, because there's only a spot for two signers on all the forms. This is where you add on, buyer number 3, 4, 5. Hopefully you don't have that many buyers. That'd be really complicated. So this addendum may be used with multiple forms as long as the forms are prepared and dated at the same time. So let's say you're making an offer, which is how I prepared this one, and you have a third buyer. You will use this form to add in the buyer. And it says right here at the top, section 1, persons, entities, identified paragraph 3 are additional signatories to the forms identified in paragraph 2, which is down here. And they have kind of some pre-printed ones that are most commonly going to be used here. In this instance, I'm writing an offer. I need to add on a third buyer. I'm going to check this box right here for the purchase. And this is stating that this sale or this purchase is going to be on this street between buyer name, check the box, and seller name, check the seller box. It's an addendum to the purchase agreement. And then by signing below, the undersigned acknowledges receipt of the documents identified above. So they are saying, yes, I have received a copy of the purchase agreement. This should be added into your signature package at the same time everybody else is signing. And if applicable, liquidated damages and arbitration, additional signature addendum attached, and 2 agrees to those terms, conditions. So, and then there's ABCD, also known as 1, 2, 3, 4. This will be buyer number 1. They will sign here, their name here. Sorry, not buyer 1. They're actually buyer 3, but on this addendum, they are number 1. And then date. And then if it's a trust sale or LLC or anything like that, you could put a title here if applicable. So, breaking it down, the first section are the parties of the transaction. Section 2 is what forms are these additional signers are signing. Let's say they need to sign a disclosure package. So you already had the contract going, you've already done the purchase and ASA then, and they need to sign off on the seller disclosure package. You would add this in to that package signing for the first 2 buyers, and then you're going to tick off the other things that they are also signing off on. So it'll be probably the TDS, probably the SPQ, checkbox others, and then you'll type in what other forms in there that they are signing, forms such as disclosures and advisories. So is it the SBSA, the LAD, the MCA, all of that stuff? Just go ahead and put it all in here as the other stuff that they're signing. And then it keeps it much more simple, in my opinion, than what they had before. Any questions, you can go ahead and toss them in the chat if I'm going too fast. AOAA. So this one, I actually see addendums getting used sometimes to add on or remove a buyer. That is definitely not the right form to use. Can you use an amendment? Technically, yes, you can, because you are proposing to add or subtract a buyer to a transaction that is already in progress. Technically, that could work, but the AOAA is the better form to use because there's some specific terminology in here that you're going to want added in. So this is the correct form to use to amend, again, modify a purchase agreement when adding, deleting, or replacing a buyer on the purchase contract. So section 1 is the proposed change in buyer. So you see here we have the assignment of agreement amendment, because again, we are proposing to the other party to add or delete somebody. You're looking at either a partial or total assignment, depending on A, B, or C, that you check. So a partial assignment would be just adding a buyer. Buyer is adding the assignee named below to the agreement and granting such assignee as partial interest in the agreement. Line B would be a total assignment, meaning there are new buyers replacing the original buyers. So the buyer is assigning all of the buyer's interest in the agreement to the assignee named below. Or C, other assignment, means you're replacing a buyer and at least one original buyer remaining or deleting a buyer. So maybe you have, I don't know, two brothers buying a house, and I don't know, lending's not going to work out that well having both of them on there, and you need to um, remove one. So you can use that in that instance. So replacing a buyer and adding at least one original buyer remaining or deleting a buyer. Maybe instead of that one buyer, it's going to be replaced by another one. This would be also when you would want to check that. Line D would be assignee names. That's where you're going to put the new buyer. So whoever the new buyer is coming off or being deleted, depending on which it is you're doing. Assignee is buyer's own trust or wholly owned entity of the buyer. That would be section E, and that does need to be done if you're going to be doing that. If you make the purchase agreement with the buyer and seller, with the buyer's names, and a couple days into escrow, they're like, hey, we actually want to purchase this in our trust now. You'll use E, but that needs to be done within the contingency timeline on the investigations, whatever that amount is that you have in the purchase agreement. Same can go for LLC, but that LLC needs to be already formed. Section 2 is the status of documents that have been delivered to the current buyer already and how and when the new buyer will sign and deliver seller documents back to the seller. So we're looking at section 2, prior documents. So let's say, yeah, you already had the purchase going and now you need to switch out a buyer or something. It says prior documents, assignee. So documents have been provided already. Assignee shall initial the first page of each document and deliver to seller all of the transaction documents previously approved by the buyer, including, but not limited to, all contract documents, inspection reports, pamphlets, advisories, disclosures, within the time specified below. Unless otherwise agreed, assignee acknowledges that all timeframes in the agreement remain the same and no additional time shall be provided for any matter, including but not limited to investigation, review documents, close of escrow. So question comes up, hey, do they also have to initial the purchase agreement? Yes, that is a contract document. So have them initial every single thing that's already been in play or delivered to the original buyer. Delivery of prior documents, so 2A. So prior documents already delivered to assignee. Assignee acknowledges that buyer has already provided assignee all prior documents, or that the prior documents have not been delivered to the assignee yet. Seller shall deliver to buyer and assignee a seller signed copy of this assignment agreement. Upon receipt of the seller signed assignment, buyer shall immediately deliver to assignee all prior documents. So 1 or 2 needs to be applied there. Pre-qualification or pre-approval of assignees. Assignee has been pre-qualified or pre-approved by lender as per agreement and copy is attached. This requirement applies even if 1E is checked. So if you look at the purchase agreement, which I actually didn't pull a snippet of here, the seller actually has a right to view that pre-qual or pre-approval with the new buyer on it, and actually can disapprove if they don't think that it's going to fly. If this buyer doesn't look any better than the previous buyer or something like that, they cannot agree. Time to return assignee initial prior documents. So section C, you're going to look at 1 or 2 initial copies of all prior documents are attached to this assignment, or assignee shall deliver initialed copies of all prior documents to seller within, by default, 3 days. You could change that day. After seller delivers to assignee the signed copy of this agreement. Number 3 is if 1E is checked, delivering return of prior documents is not required because assignee is buyer's own trust or wholly owned entity of the buyer. So if you are the 2 buyers and you're assigning this into the trust or LLC that you already own prior to the offer being made, then all of that stuff doesn't have to happen. You're just assigning it into the trust name. So this one's pretty important. D, effect of failure to return or attach documents. Seller, after first delivering notice to buyer to perform, may cancel this assignment, and assignment shall have no further force and effect if prior documents, if assignee does not deliver to seller all prior documents with time specified in 2C, or pre-qual, pre-approval, if assignee does not attach same pre-qual or pre-approval from buyer's lender as required by buyer. So when you're on the buyer side, you want to make sure that you are performing here. Otherwise, you're going to probably get a notice to perform. So sections A, B, and C must be adhered to. Otherwise, D1 or D2 may be enforced by the seller. Section 3 is to disclose any consideration the assigner may be receiving for the assignment. Wholesalers, things like that. Usually there's some sort of money being paid. You need to disclose that. So it's defaulted to A, which is saying the buyer has not received and will not receive any monetary consideration from the assignee for this assignment. This is the most common, especially when you're adding or deleting a buyer. There's not going to be consideration in most of those instances. All right. So what do we have next? Oh, actually, before I move on, I want to make a note that it is important to know that the assignor is not released from their obligations of the purchase as stated on lines 4 through 9. So be sure to point that out here to the new assignee and actually the assignor, because if they think that by, maybe they assigned this contract to a friend or something like that, or the previous person coming off the contract is assigning it over to someone new, they are not relieved of their contract obligations. So if you're assigning it to a completely new buyer, the original buyer, the assignor, is still on the hook for getting this thing closed. So that's a really important aspect of these assignments. How are we looking on time? All right, 2 more forms. If there's any others you want me to cover on any meeting coming up, throw them in the chat or send me a text or something like that. I like going over these types of forms just with everybody on so we can ask questions, discuss them, and just so we can all be better at what we do. Let's see here. So the COP form, contingency for sale of buyer's property. Fairly common form. Section 1 states that the buyer's contingency will, what it will be. Typically, the default option is A. If checkboxed, if A applies, then sections 2 and 4 must be completed. However, B or C could also apply and we need to be completed along with 2 or 4. Let's look at that. So contingency for sale of buyer's property. So this is a buyer who wants to make an offer on a replacement property, but they need to sell their property first in order to be able to do so. So their funds to close on the new property are coming from the sale of their existing property. Does not have to be the property they live in. It can be any property really. They could say, hey, I'm selling the lake house, and we're going to buy this other house over here contingent upon that one selling. So that could definitely be a scenario. So section 1 is so the buyer's property contingency. This agreement is contingent upon A, buyer entering into a contract for sale of and closing escrow on the buyer's property. So this is saying that I have to get into escrow and close this property in order to buy the next one. Or B could also apply, and you would checkbox that this is only going to be contingent upon entering into a contract for the sale of the buyer's property. Or C, only closing escrow on the buyer's property, which is already an escrow with, and then you're going to type in the escrow company name, the escrow number, and has a contractual close date of, and then you'll put the close of escrow for their existing property, the one that they're selling. A copy of the contract for the buyer's property with the contact information escrow for that sale, collectively escrow evidence, is attached to this COP form or will be delivered within, by default, 2 days. So you also need to provide that purchase contract. Section 2 is the timeline for the buyer entering into the contract to sell their current property. Timelines can be left default or adjusted by typing in new days. These timelines will apply for a seller notice of buyer to perform should they not be adhered to. So buyer entering in a contract for sale of the buyer's property. So if we checked 1A or 1B up here in the first section, then we have to fill in section 2 as well. And we're saying that the buyer shall have 17 days after acceptance to enter into contract to sell their property. So they're saying we're making an offer and we're telling you that this is going to be contingent upon us getting our property into escrow within 17 days, and B, by earlier of the time specified in 2A, so 17 days by default, or 2, within 2 days after buyer entering the contract to sale the buyer's property, buyer shall deliver escrow evidence. So basically, after it does get into contract, the buyer needs to provide that information to the seller of the property they are purchasing, known as their replacement property. So they need to do that within 2 days. So next up, section 3 is the status of the listing of the buyer's property. Is it listed or is it unlisted? Listing an MLS of buyer's property if 1A or 1B applies. So again, we're talking 1A, 1B. Buyer has signed a listing agreement with the property, and then you just put in the company name, or shall, within 3 days after acceptance, sign a listing with said company. 3B, buyer's property is or will be submitted to the MLS in the geographical area where the buyer's property is located, or buyer's property will not be submitted to MLS in the geographical area where the buyer is located. So more than likely you are not going to check that box. Buyer shall deliver to seller evidence of both the listing agreement and, if applicable, the MLS listing within 1 day after acceptance if buyer's property is already listed with a real estate brokerage, or if not already listed, within 1 day after listing with a real estate brokerage. So really, when you look at these forms as a whole, and this is kind of why I broke it down, they can be like, oh my goodness, but if you break it down into these sections, they're much easier to understand and kind of fill out. So just kind of read each section and go, okay, this makes sense, and then check your boxes accordingly. So section 4 pertains to the sale of property contingency from section 1A or 1C above. So close of escrow of buyer's property. If 1A, 1C applies, buyer has until the following time to close escrow on the sale of buyer's property. So that's either a scheduled close of escrow of seller's property, or if checkbox, no later than 5 days prior to the scheduled close of escrow. Once a buyer's property closes, buyer can no longer use this contingency to cancel the agreement. Now, this one gets a little confusing for a lot, so let's break that down a little bit. So this section states that either the close of escrow for the purchase of the replacement property, which is the buyer's property, is the latest day the buyer's property can close escrow. This would essentially mean a concurrent closing will need to take place for both parties. Depending on your county, such as Los Angeles, this might be impossible to perform. So you want to check that because you're saying that we're going to close the buyer's property the same day that we are closing the replacement property. That doesn't always work because some counties just simply don't allow it to happen, or if it would be such a small percentage of possibility that it's just probably not going to happen. At earliest, it's probably going to be the next day. So you want to be mindful of that. Or if checkbox, the buyer property sale will need to close escrow 5 days or earlier default from the scheduled close of escrow of the replacement property. So if you check that box, it's saying we are going to close 5 days or sooner than what we are proposing we close this replacement property, the close of escrow date there. So make sure you have your timelines correct in the beginning, or as correct as possible when you're preparing these types of contingencies, because you need to be aware of concurrent closing. Can it happen? If that's going to happen, do you need an SIP? Do you need a seller in possession? Because if you're doing a concurrent close where the buyer's property that they are selling is closing on the same day as the property they are buying, are they already out of the property? Do they need some time to get out of the property? More than likely, yes. So, and that would pertain to their sale. Make sure you have more than likely an SIP in place for at least a couple days to allow them to close escrow essentially on both if you're doing the concurrent closing, and have time to move out all their stuff, because that probably all of that stuff is probably not going to happen in one day. That is a very slim chance. Sections 5 through 8 pertain to status updates, cancellations, backup offers, and removal of COP contingencies. So yes, they need to keep the seller informed in the status of their sale. Cancellation of buyer's property. If the buyer's property is in or enters escrow and either party to that escrow gives a notice of cancellation of contract, the buyer needs to notify the seller of their replacement property within 2 days of that cancellation happening. That's when things typically start to unravel. Backup offers and seller right to require buyer to remove contingencies. So this one gets a little contentious, I guess, when you're negotiating this with the purchase of the replacement property. So removal of buyer's contingencies and proof of funds. Let's look at 7B and 7C. Unless 7C3 is checked, that would be down here, no right to notify buyer. If seller accepts a written backup offer and provides a buyer the copy of the signed accepted backup offer within the time specified in 7C1, it's down here, immediate right to notify buyer, or 2, delayed right to notify buyer, seller shall have the right to give written notice to buyer to, in writing, remove this contingency of sale, remove the loan contingency, if any, and provide verification of sufficient funds to close escrow without the sale of buyer's property. Seller may use the bottom of page 2 of this form to comply with the written notice requirement of this paragraph. If buyer fails to complete these actions within 2 days after delivery of such notice, Seller may then immediately cancel the agreement in writing. You notice they didn't say anything about a notice to perform. So let's look at 7C, because this question comes up a lot. Which one do I click? Well, it could be default, number 1, or 2 or 3. What is going to apply, and what is the seller of the property they are trying to purchase, what are they going to agree to? So time to give notice to remove contingency. Seller shall have the right to invoke the notice provisions in 7B, so the one we just covered, to immediate right to notify buyer anytime after acceptance. So this would be maybe this buyer and that seller came to terms, they're in escrow, and 5 days later, some other buyer comes and makes an offer on that replacement property, and maybe it's a better offer than what they have going. This is saying that the seller can immediately notify the buyer of the provisions of number 2 to remove their contingencies and provide proof of funds that they can close. Or you would want to select C2, which is the better option. It's the safer option for the buyer. And that is a delayed right to notify buyer, so no earlier than by default 17 days after acceptance. So this is saying that the seller cannot send cancellation, notice to perform, anything like that prior to 17 days after the acceptance of this offer for the buyer to remove this contingency, whether they have a backup offer or not. So this gives the buyer time, 17 days in this instance, to at least get their property under contract and feel a little confident about moving forward with this purchase. And you can change this to any timeline you want. It's defaulted to 17 days. Or 3, which is the strongest for the buyer, no right to notify the buyer. Seller shall not have the right to invoke the provisions of 7B during the entire term of this agreement. So this is locking the seller in to this purchase for a minimum of the close of escrow time. Or I guess if the buyer is not performing on any of the contingency releases, then they can have an out there too. But this is really locking them in. I don't see a lot of sellers accept this. Usually I see a 1 or a 2. 3 is the best for the buyer though. That's locking the seller in as tight as possible to saying, you're with me. You are going to close this deal with me. And you're not going to send me a notice to perform to remove this contingency or be able to accept a backup offer, essentially, at least while we're in escrow. So does that make sense on that, hopefully? Because that one I get a lot of questions on. If you have questions on it, throw them in the chat or whatever. Sections 9 through 11 pertain to cancellation rights. I'm not going to go over these too much, but you'll want to read them. What is the seller's right to cancel? What is the buyer's right to cancel? We will touch on 11 real quick. Time for performance of contract obligations and delivery of buyer deposit. So you'll want to do something here in section 11. So time periods in this agreement for inspections, contingencies, covenants, close of escrow, and other obligations, excluding those in this addendum, shall begin as specified in the agreement. That is the default. So offer gets accepted, buyer's got whatever, 17 days to get their investigations done, start moving forward on their loan, get the appraisal, all that stuff. Or if they check this box on the day after the buyer delivers to seller any of the following: escrow evidence of the buyer's property, or buyer's election in writing signed by the buyer to begin time periods, or buyer's removal is contingency. So if you select this box, you're saying that we're going to get into contract, but we're not going to do any timelines yet. We're going to wait until my property gets into escrow, And then when I deliver to you evidence of that, then the clock starts for investigations, appraisal, loan contingencies. So that is, in my opinion, the better one to choose. Most listing agents aren't going to go for that because they want this property to sell, right? They don't want to wait around for however long, and you haven't even done investigations yet to see if you even like this property. So 11B is the buyer's deposit. Buyer's deposit shall be delivered to escrow within time specified in the agreement. So again, we have a contract acceptance. Buyer has 3 business days to get their EMD into escrow. Or if they check this box within 3 business days after the buyer delivers the same stuff that they have gone into contract. So again, if they check both these boxes here, they're saying that we're not depositing earnest money and we're not starting contract timelines until my property goes into escrow. And again, on the listing side, that's a little dicey. I don't know that I would accept that. I would possibly accept earnest money going into escrow and maybe this other box check to start timelines. That would be a compromise, but it's up to you and seller situation. I see a question come in. What's the name of this form? This form that I'm going over right now is the COP, contingency of purchase. So we'll do one last one. I know we're a little bit over. This one's not too bad. So the SPRP, here we go. This addendum, because there's an addendum to the purchase agreement, is used to create a contingency for the seller to be able to locate and or purchase a replacement property. Section 1 creates a contingency for the seller to either locate a replacement property to purchase within 17 days or any amount of days, that's default, or state they have already located a replacement property and or choose and or close that replacement property. So this would be used when a seller is selling their home and they receive an offer on their home. They're going to want to probably counteroffer with this form if they want to make that purchase or that sale of their home contingent upon them being able to locate another one and close on it. So that is a common fear with sellers is, what if I can't find another property? Well, you will put this agreement in place to protect them. So section 1, seller's purchase of replacement property. So this is putting that contingency in place, finding replacement property. This agreement is contingent upon seller entering into a contract to acquire replacement property or identifying a suitable property to move to. Seller shall within 17 days after acceptance remove the finding replacement property contingent or cancel this agreement. It goes on. So in this scenario, they might actually have a COP form that we just went over on for their replacement property. So they now have their sale contingent upon them closing on the replacement property, which is contingent upon them being able to sell this property. So you can see how that kind of goes in a circle there. Or B, seller has entered, so this is saying that, hey, we are going to, we want 17 days to find a replacement property, okay, buyer? Or buyer, we have already found another property and we are in escrow on it, and they probably have a COP. This is the escrow holder and this is the escrow number. And C, we want to make this close of replacement property as a contingency. The agreement is contingent upon seller's ability to close escrow on replacement property according to that contract. This is a contingency in favor of the seller. Seller by the scheduled close of escrow date for replacement property shall either close escrow or remove this contingency in writing. What that means is, let's say they are in escrow on their replacement property and they're also an escrow on their current property, and they have this SPRP in place. And let's say, for whatever reason, the purchase of their replacement property falls out of escrow. That doesn't mean they need to continue selling this home to this buyer without a replacement property in place. So that's when you would check this box saying that we have to be able to close this other property in order for me to sell this home to you. Okay, buyer? Section 2 are the time periods for which the contract timelines take place. A little bit like the COP, as far as time periods to start the investigations, the buyer's deposit, etc. Close of escrow, party agrees that seller may extend the close of escrow date for the sale of seller's property for a maximum of X days or until X date by providing buyer written notice at the same time. So you might want to throw in, 5 days, something like that, a little cushion in there should things kind of go awry because you've got a lot of contingencies working here. Section 3 and 4 pertain to cancellations of the seller's replacement property and contingency removals. So how those work, cancellation of replacement property, the seller's replacement property is in or enters escrow, and there is another agreement, and either party to that escrow or agreement gives the other notice cancellation, seller within 2 days delivered to the buyer of their property the written notice of the cancellation, removing contingencies even after the expiration of the time for finding replacement property contingency specified in paragraph 1. Seller retains the right to remove the finding replacement property contingent or cancel the agreement until buyer cancels pursuant to paragraph 1A. Once buyer receives seller's written removal of the finding replacement property contingency, buyer may not cancel. Sections 5 and 6 explain buyer cancellation rights. Just for sake of time, I'm not going to run through that, but we ran over today. But I would read through 5 and 6 so you can just really understand how it works. I will touch real quick on number 6C actually, because I do like this on the seller's right to cancel. So a seller may cancel the agreement in writing as follows. If prior to seller's removal of finding replacement property contingency, seller is unable to enter into a contract to acquire replacement property. If paragraph 1C is checked, seller is unable to close escrow on replacement property. 6C, so buyer's costs. If seller cancels pursuant to paragraph 6A or 6B, seller shall return any deposit. And if checked, after delivering receipts to escrow holder, buyer shall be entitled to buyer's reasonable out-of-pocket expenses for inspection reports, appraisal fees under the agreement. And then you can check the box, which total amount should be no more than X. So if you are on the buy side of a seller using a SPRP, contingency, you'll probably want to have an amount in there because should the seller cancel on that buyer, it's really it's hard luck for the buyer, right? Because they didn't do anything wrong. They were intending on purchasing, but all of a sudden the seller's side fell apart. So they're going to want to be reimbursed for their appraisals, home inspections, whatever they've put money into as far as due diligence. I'm sure they're going to want to get, reimbursed for that. So I would put an amount in here, check that box. I would check both boxes, put in an amount there, whatever, no more than $1,500. Depends on, I guess, what type of inspections they're planning on doing. If they're doing a lot of different types of inspections, they can get a little pricey. And then also the appraisal, which, can run $800 right there. So definitely take a look at 6C if you are on the buy side of a seller using an SPRP. So again, if you ever want to run through these, shoot them over to me for review or, to run a scenario. just give me a call up or shoot me an email text, and we can run through these. But hopefully these kind of broke it down a little bit for you. These are some of the more common ones. If you want me to cover anything else, I like doing these. I think they're informative for everybody. Obviously, it's slightly dry, but this is our business that we're in. So understanding how these work really make you a pro at putting these deals together. And if you do them right in the beginning, if you structure them right in the beginning, you'll find that when you get close to close of escrow, when you're hitting those last minute snags, those will be far and few between because you all have already spelled out in the beginning with the contingency addendums how how these are going to play out essentially. So thanks for attending, and we'll be back next week, and hope everybody has a great week. I'm going to check chat real quick, make sure there's nothing else in here. Doesn't look like it. Yeah, feel free to shoot me a text though or an email of anything you want me to cover. We will talk to you later.